And we are live. There we go. Had some small technical issues with YouTube this week. It's been an adventure. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Josh's Game Grit. This is episode 44 because last week was a skip week. We can get into reasons about why that was the case, but suffice to say, sometimes I have way too much to do. You probably will notice that this is kind of a lot nicer looking. The space, the video quality, all of it. We've been really working lately on trying to up our production value. So I've got sort of a brand new webcam setup and so forth. And glorious HD that is properly lit. Thank you, phone. And now you get muted because that's going to be Interruption City. I see a lot of our regulars are here. Good to see you, Jared NB and TK1138. You guys are here to watch me illustrate some map tiles again, which is something I haven't been up to very much lately, but it's an interesting adventure for me because I'm actually, at the moment, trying to work out how to do a little bit of a different style than usual. So I know last week I was kind of walking through, or 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, last stream, I was walking through how I would do a lot of these sorts of tiles in the past. And I sat with that tile and I really looked at it, and I'll bring it up here. Jared says, what? No goth, Josh? But I'll show you this was the tile that we were tinkering with last week. And I had done some illustration work around the grass, and we'd kind of laid down all of our ground layers and planned out where things were going to be. But I was really going back and looking at sort of primary sources on this, because I have made maps in the past that look like this, but for this particular project, this is actually a little bit too photoreal. It's gonna kind of fight with everything else we've got that's gonna go into this current project, because we're working with other assets that are of an anime style. They're, illustrated assets. So if you go a little bit too realistic, especially with, this sort of thing here, at some point it stops looking like it's illustrated and stops looking like it goes with the same game. So I've really been diving into the last 2 weeks, kind of getting the rest of the pieces for this project kind of in place and seeing what that aesthetic looks like. And then beyond that, looking at all of the tiles we've currently done and seeing how that art might be better adjusted to make a more coherent overall presentation. Oh, I see Richard and Ryan have also joined us, and Matt. Good to see all of you. Richard says, "Oh, Vassal update coming." Yeah, I've already been tinkering with it. There's a whole bunch of things that are going to change, because all of our cards for this particular project are laid out now. And our tokens, and we've got a box design in the works, so the whole brand is moving forward pretty nicely. There's some discussions going on right now between the publisher, the licensor, and us about exactly how we might be changing or tweaking some of the components, but that's kind of later. We're gonna show you that once that's properly announced. Although, of course, our Japanime Tactics projects with Japanime Tactics the project is announced. You guys haven't seen anything for it yet, and I'm not going to share with you any of the licensor-specific stuff until I get the go-ahead approvals-wise for that. But I think it's a little bit of a different style for me, so if you've watched some of our previous streams, I think it'll be neat to see me working in a different style, maybe? I don't know. But let's actually pause this tile for a second and go back and look at... This is our prototype map tile for the game. Now these were done, let's be honest, I did these very slapdash. This is 4 textures, a couple of cheap layer styles, and some outlines. But there's some things about this that are actually kind of working for that animated aesthetic. First up is the color palette. The grass here is really nice and very sort of vibrant green, which I kind of intended to keep on this one and then kind of lost my way. It's hard when you don't have them up on two monitors. Right now I've got YouTube. I've got kind of main monitor here with Photoshop, which is the screen I'm sharing with you. And then my other monitor is OBS and YouTube. And I don't really have a second display or a third display yet. God, I don't want a third display. But I don't have a third window yet to put all my reference material on screen at the same time while streaming. So instead, I'm going to go through and show you guys what I've been tinkering with the last little bit, because I kind of don't think that this grass looks like animated grass. Every animated movie I've seen, grass is a lot more abstract than this. Gravel stones are a lot more abstract than this, generally. Even when it's a nice painted background quality image. So if we go and look at something like... I'm going to go to my standard go-to here. If you guys know the work of Animation Studio Ghibli, they have such a wonderful bright aesthetic that a lot of other animated films also kind of capture. They are really detailed in their grass, in their backgrounds, in their treatment of trees and whatnot. But we've got kind of a need to have this kind of rolling grassy field setup. And I actually pulled this image in a couple of different color variations earlier. But there's a very particular way that animated films illustrate the natural environment, trees, rocks, grass, that is not really how I work, but I'm very interested to know, or to kind of tinker with. Let's look at this guy. Oh, that's very small. That's not going to tell me anything. Very interested to sort of tinker with a little bit of a different style for this project, particularly because all of our other assets are hand-drawn and animated. They don't have a particular computer graphics look, and that's actually the style I generally work in. So I've been really kind of trying to push my my boundaries here and kind of get some different style. This is a good reference, actually. Animated films tend to do... There's a very particular way that they paint trees. There's a few styles, but like there's a certain layering of the color and the texture that I think we're probably going to want to try and pull into our what we are using for our cover squares, our like bushes and undergrowth squares. And this is going to be a good reference actually for that. Kick that over there off the display. And then let me show you guys what I've been messing around with. So this, it would help if I could see what's going on here. Been working on painting a style that matches the color palette better and also matches the texture and feel. So I've got a couple of different anime backgrounds here. Totoro is particularly helpful for this because it is such a bright, whimsical film. But really going for an aesthetic that matches this kind of windblown grass. And even I probably could paint this a little bit better if I actually went in and did a lot more manual painting, but trying to show the actual motion of the grass. For something that should be a wilderness area. And if we look at kind of this spot, well, let me hide these for a second. Globally, if I zoom way out on this, globally the grass is the right color. It fits well in this spot, because you can see by bordering them together. But if I look at it up real close, the textures actually aren't really the same. And I'm having a bit of difficulty here because I'm working in a totally different size, right? This is a very low resolution image I grabbed off the internet. And what I'm trying to paint is a very high resolution tile. Because this tile is almost 2,800 pixels wide. It's a pretty big tile. So I'm not going to get really the same trying to paint this level of coarseness in the grass at this resolution is just going to not really look great. So I'm trying to come up with a good compromise that gets the atmosphere of that little reference piece without so much of the kind of really sharp detail. This kind of captures the atmosphere but has that detail to it. And the color is also a lot better. So I'm actually going to move this. Let's put this in its own file for a sec. Zoom way in on it. I still want to leave this up because actually the thing I want to tinker with today, and you guys can watch me work through it, is rocks. I really like the way the rocks look in this image. They have kind of a lovely three-tone shade, kind of a black edged key line, like they were hand-drawn with a pen. And then they have kind of sort of two tones of sort of marbly earth texture, color variation in the middle. And I'm going to try and work that into our tile design in place of this thing, these big boulders, because these are very, very hastily done in Photoshop tricks. So, and I've done full maps like this years and years ago. I've done maps where I've used these sorts of tricks to get all of my terrain done. You kind of have to hide it though, because it looks garish when it's too big. But for the purposes of something for playtesting, more than good enough. It's just that now we got to move beyond that level of detail. So I'm actually going to go back to this tile because I like the layout of this tile. I still really like how this tile is arranged and all the cover and rocks we have. But I'm going to swap in the new grass. So let's hide that. Let's merge down everything and copy it. And then put it in here. Totally different color palette universe. Now I'm going to have to change everything else to play nicely. But that's fine, because I think this is going to work out better anyway. I'm going to have to tinker with how I'm blending the other tiles and terrain, because that's totally not working. Probably going to have to manually paint in some strands of grass around the rocks just to blend them in like it's been done here. You can kind of see where the blades of grass are poking out and overlapping. I'm sure I'll have to go in and do that later. Let's also get rid of our rough terrain for now. No, don't want that. That was an earlier attempt that isn't quite the right color, but I think also looks kind of nice. And is this our grid? Cool, so we do have the grid. Let's hide that for now. And let's see how the bush is stacking up here. It's a little bit too dark, especially in this color palette. They're totally different. So let's try. Let's just do a test here. Tinker with this a little bit. I've got a few different pieces of background art that I've been pulling in. There's a pretty classic like three-tone tree anime style. And you can see actually when you zoom way in, like there's really not that much detail to these. The detailing is entirely in how the shapes overlap. And not really so much in any of the textures. Maybe I can find one with a better tree or some better bushes. This is mostly grasses. We'll come back to that one later. Where's my reference art? Yeah. Okay, so this one. Let's put this in here for comparison's sake. I probably should close some stuff because I'm going to run out of memory really quickly otherwise. I have a pretty good machine, but streaming and running all of my photo editing apps at the same time is a bit much. All right. If you guys have comments or questions about some of the stuff I'm doing, by all means, drop me a line in the chat. Maybe you got some suggestions for how I can tweak this. But I think right now, the goal is going to be to try and make this hill back here in this illustration. We're going to see if doing the bush more like that tracks. Because I think right now my leaves are actually too small on this bush. That is exactly it. So Jared said the color palette matches, but it seems like the art you are referencing has more shadowing. It does. There's a lot of these kind of rolling shadows in the grass. But a section like this where we've got, you know, that chunk there is pretty close. So I've got the highlight area down, but I don't have the kind of rolling shadow effect that's going on. And probably I'm going to have to actually do a more directional shadow coming off of some of the objects that are tall and not just blowing grass. But I think I might also have to go and do something like probably this. Let's go. Probably will have to make some bigger, softer shadows that are not green yellow. Get them in there in blue. Let's do a quick test on that actually, because it's a good point. It's a really good point that I'm going to need some additional detailing in the ground just to make the areas with the grass actually pop. This might not be blue enough. Let's go back to full saturation. But like immediately, just painting in some shadow lines where the ground might be, you know, curving slightly will really make that pop. Will make that field look like there are clumps of grass and the ground is not perfectly level and even. That will go a long way to getting that kind of rolling grassy field blowing in the wind look. And probably I'll end up painting this individually on each tile, even if I come up with a faster way to do all of the other textures. So let's see. Zoom out and have a look at that. Night and day. Yeah, I think that's quite a lot better. In fact, it might be a little too much. I can tinker with exactly how much that should show in there. But like, yeah, let's leave that. Leave that there for now. So let's see. Shrub first, rocks first. We've got our shrub from last time, but it is definitely going to be too detailed. And I think the existing assets I've got in terms of brushes and stuff that I was using to kind of quick freehand this, I think are going to be too... They're not going to be the right shape and detail. You know what? Maybe I should just make a brush that looks like this. That has these like scattered leaves. Or has like scattered grasses. Because that's also a possibility. I was looking at something like this where, you know, I've absolutely got a particular texture, but has no inherent color. So I'll be able to overlay this and then do some hue and saturation work and color it afterwards. Get all of my shading done first and then get the rest done after. Let's do a test here actually. Tinker with some stuff. We want... Okay, let's do that. Black to white. Huh. We need that to be better. Need them solid, not... And these are obviously too detailed as well right now, but wonder if I can get more of the grass kind of texture or maybe shrub texture out of this. Let's go... I don't know if you've ever seen this done or not, but I'm going to basically make a repeating pattern now. So what I've done is wrapped the left edge around to the right so that the four edges and corner, the four corners of my illustration meet in the middle. And now I can paint over them. And by doing so, hide all of the gaps to make it seamless. I think I might need... Yeah, let's get a few smaller ones in there, just for detail. Offset again. And now I know this is close to seamless. Where was it not? That spot needs a little bit of work. Pretty close. That one looks pretty good also. Cool. Alright, that should now be seamless. Define pattern. Not brush, although that might also be interesting. Pattern. Alright. Let's go back to this. Let's take the current bush and... You know what, I'm going to keep the actual outer shape. I think that might be helpful. And then I'm going to hide the rest of it. We'll try it. We'll do another take on this. And you know what? Why not pull the colors directly from the illustration? Why not? Looks to me like we probably need to do... Should fill this in a bit. Too much, too much. Better, that'll work. Okay. Curiosity here. Let's try. Yes. Try this. I think probably I have a little bit too much. I've done a silly thing. I think I have a little bit too much in the way of contrast is the right word I'm searching for. Let's see about that. Nah, you know what? Let's just do this the easy way. This is the jankiest of Photoshop filters that is not usually useful for much. But I think my actual problem is that I want much narrower range. Let's just make that really narrow. But probably not black. Probably like, yep, helpful. Probably like that. Just blow out the contrast completely. Put it back in. Look at that. It's a little bit much still, but like, hey. All of a sudden it looks like really leafy grass. Smooth it out a bit. Yeah. Sometimes you just gotta feel out the contrast and see how they go. But check this out. That looks like it's got real potential for lack of a better term, quick shading some kind of bush here. What about if we do that? I really do think I'm going to need to make those plant brushes, because I don't see how I'm going to get that effect otherwise. I mean, yeah, I could paint each individual leaf, but look, I'm lazy. That's how that is. All right. Put that away for a second. Let's get make that a little bit more gray-green. And at some point I am going to need a really dark shadow in it, because that's what's going to give it definition through all the layers. And maybe I just need to paint a lot more layers. That could also be the case. Might be a little too big. Okay, so we got that one. Let's get That's not bad. That kind of works. If I do another pass on top. For the scale we're working for on the map, I think that layering is probably fine. It's got the right kind of three-tone effect, but it doesn't really... I'm going to have to actually paint the details properly, I think, is the problem. Because that's kind of an indistinct mass of a shape, but... Jared also says small clumps of flowers or other types of grasses and like a 2 to 5% of the surface would break up the meadow. Absolutely. That's not something I want to do at this stage. I want to get the basic level, the basic kind of background texture for everything set, and then go in and sprinkle details, because that will make the whole thing look more complete. You're absolutely right about that. That is 100% true. We can get some layering like that. Not really happy with that. That's not working for me. Where's my other one? pull it up as a comparison. So yeah, that was way too detailed. This one is not detailed enough, probably. I need something better resolution than background art. Probably has to look more like this one in the foreground with the little leaf texture. And that's gonna take some doing. To do that now or to do that later is the question. Let's work on some rocks. I grow tired of this bush. We'll deal with it later. I know that I'm going to need it, but I have lots of other parts of this that I need to layer in as well. So let's grab my reference material again. Put that away. Now these rocks look like they're probably not person height. They're going to have to be taller and sharper. But I think the idea is right. I think that's probably going to work. So let's do this. We need something that is not... Where the heck are my good pencil brushes? I can't remember. These aren't bad. Alright, so kind of need like a big tall rock. You guys don't see me paint very often. I'm much more of a like, prefer to do things in a more automated process kind of way. Let's put those away for a sec too. Let's get some detail in there. Okay. I was curious about this because I knew this was a style I was going to kind of want to work in later for this project, but I was really curious to see how other artists have done this kind of stuff. So I have been watching all kinds of other people do similar painting stuff to this. But in almost every case, I have actually not found anyone else that has a similar process to me. I haven't really found too much in the way of like comics artists or people who are doing this sort of thing. Maybe that means I have a unique art style. That would be cool. Alright, well, that's not horrible. Good enough place to start. You can always tinker with it later. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger to make it obvious it fills the whole square and looks like a big tall thing. Let's pull some colors from these because why not? Yeah, let's do this. I should probably pick a mid-tone actually. That would make this easier. What am I doing? There we go. Oh, see, I have old settings that didn't clear. Didn't program my brushes to clear them either. It's like, why am I not getting the effect that I was looking for? This is very weird. In fact, actually, I think I might want the one without the opacity trigger for the base layer. That makes sense. Rock the first. Alright. Rock highlights. Well, let's get the shadow as well. So the shadow is going to be a weird old trick that I learned years and years ago. Shadows, when you're illustrating things, shadows look better when they're blue. And highlights look better when they're slightly yellow. Especially, well, when you're painting for sunlight anyway. Tends to look just... tends to work better. I think it's a painter's trick about getting your shading not only from the value, the light and dark of the color, but also the actual color itself, because some colors just sort of, the brain reads them as darker. Depends. This probably shouldn't be so smooth. I don't really like how patchy that turned out. Let's just do this. Paint them in a cell. Helps if I'm painting the actual thing and not the area around it. Let's actually try painting them in more of a cell shaded style. And then we'll get back to adding detail and bust them into here. So we'll get that. Jared says, is there an actual location area if the geology adds to the feel? Yeah, I'm not working too specifically on like a particular area. I don't know this particular setting well enough to know if like that's a thing. But in terms of going off of like... let's do a little bit more back here. In terms of going off the illustration, just kind of and try and match the style of these boulders. Alright, let's do that for now. Let's go again. So darkest shadows will be here probably. Oops. What am I doing? Let's get some additional, you know, let's put these in too. Some additional detail in the cracks. Cool. We've got that. Also going to go and do... let's do a highlight layer. The first one anyway. And there's also a curious sort of animator trick thing about, this is the wrong thing, coloring your lines. So as much as it's kind of a thing to paint in like a black comic book line, if you actually go and do your lines like a darker version of your darkest color instead of black, it blends a lot better rather than just like making them translucent. I'm working with them off that. So in this case, just making them brown. Immediately a lot better. Gonna add some color variation. So let's get something more yellow. And something more gray-green. But I think darker. Actually, looks like my darkest shadow layer is not dark enough. But then when I'm done, I can also go and paint a shadow for the actual rock onto the grass. And then blend the rock into the grass by painting in the blades of grass around it. Which actually I won't paint, probably won't paint more grass, I'll probably just mask the rock. See if we get the shape right. Oh, do you have words about this? Yeah, you do. You're always interrupting the stream. Catus interruptus. Like Wile E. Coyote. Yeah? Okay, let's see. There we go. Pretty good blue shadow. I'm actually going to, before I lock that in, I do this a lot with files because make myself a palette. Because at some point I'm going to go back and want to paint more shadows like that, and I want them all to match. And now I can also just paint them directly without tinkering. Okay, so Rock the First. So TK1138 asks the $1,000,000 question here, which is, now are you going to keep the shadow direction consistent across every tile? I'm going to do a bunch and see, because I have a suspicion that if I try and do the 5 o'clock shadow for every tile, they're going to look weird when you put them together. So I want to see if I can get away with doing it like this for now and see if it's weird when I start taking them and turning, like, you know, if you lay them all out and then you turn 190 degrees, is it like really, really jarring to the overall experience, or will I get away with it? And we'll kind of find out. With tiles, it's tough because like unless you go for a totally bird's eye view, top down, the sun is directly overhead, you're always going to have that problem. And it goes away when you're doing indoor tiles because we light most rooms either from one wall, and we assume that that's local lighting and not global, or we've got overhead lighting, in which case the middle of the room tends to be bright, and then the as you get further away from the light source, the shadows where the walls meet the floor, those places tend to look better when they're a little bit shadowy compared to sort of a main overhead highlight. So I don't know, like, I think in order to get this to look like it belongs in an anime, I don't know about doing a flat overhead shade, because if I do that, and I can actually, let's just do this for a sec. Let's assume that we're seeing the boulder straight on. My shading is going to have to look different. It's going to have to be like all the way around the bottom. Like the only way to kind of make that work is to kind of do like, you paint all your edges and stuff, and you work your way up to it. Like it almost just becomes like this. No, not like that. Like this. Also, also not like that. There. Like you really just get into kind of that. You need a strong highlight in the middle, and you lose all of the nice communication of depth. Because even if I paint this same rock, like the way I've done now, even if I go and paint it directly overhead, it's still going to look flat. You're not going to be able to get that. You're not going to sell the fact that this is a 3D object, or that it has, casting a shadow and all that. It actually looks like my lines could use some more work. Where's my brush? I was using that one. Get some pits in there. That looks like that will help sell the detailing a little bit. I could actually use a little more in that regard. My erase. Thank you. That would be the tablet freaking out just there. Which layer is that on? That's the highlight layer. Even better. We have painted that rock. And it probably needs even one more highlight layer, actually, if I'm doing the cell shaded route here like I am. Let's go... Yeah, there. I think we got a rock. I can do a few more of those. We'll see how that turns out. But I think that's the way to go. And really, if I want to be very consistent about how these appear across all of my objects, I don't paint these colors individually. I make a layer which is the color spread across the entire page. So, for example, let's pull this to the top, get the actual color from it. And rather than having this like that, I would go solid color, this one, and mask it. So this is at 65. And now, wherever I am working on the illustration, I don't need to have... Oops. This doesn't need to be there. Because I can get that one. But now I can paint this shadow color anywhere I want in the illustration. So that way, if I need to do another rock and I can do the same layer shadow pass across all of them all at once, I know they'll all be the same color because it's set up in Photoshop that they're all one swatch. It's really handy, actually. This is how I've painted almost like paint by number guides before for miniatures, or tinkering with painting designs on photographs of miniatures rather than it's faster to do it in Photoshop and just slap some color on and tweak the colors and see what you want to actually end up painting. It's way faster to do that than it is to start tinkering out with an actual physical model. So it makes sense to do kind of one layer for your whole color tone, and then just choose where that color shows through. Richard says, it's a cloudy day, so the shadows are very, very faint and not so jarring. It's possible too. There are lots of ways we can make this work. And oddly enough, in my experience, seeing them like this, where they've got a really long drop shadow, is actually just generally better. I think even if it looks artistically wrong, when you have them all matched up, something about having them like that clues your brain into this is a 3D object, even if there's no master plan lighting rule for how this 3D object exists in the space. It doesn't really seem to matter so much. I've also decided that I don't like that crease. Never knew that you cared so much about rocks, but I think it looks a lot better with that flat panel. Never knew. But yeah, I think that is a very doable art style for these tiles. We're coming up on about an hour, actually. It is 4:55. So, not sure. Probably that's the last big thing I'm going to do for the stream so far today. Let's actually put the bush back in now that I think about it. Let's see what that original bush looked like. I'm going to have to do the bushes in the same style. If I'm picking a direction for a global light source, all of my bushes need to be done with that light source too. I at least have to be consistent within a single tile, or it'll be really weird. Oh, and we also forgot to blend the rock into the grass, so let's do that too while we're here. To blend the rock in or to paint the grass around? I think probably paint the grass around, actually. I think that will work better. Just sample some grass. Where are we at? We want to blend. I think we actually want the darker ones. Let's do those first. We'll just see if we can get a... You guys are seeing it on a much bigger scale than it would ever be seen in print. You got to remember that this boulder, this grid square, is 1.5 inches across. So these little grass flecks are actually tiny, and I can be pretty sloppy with them and still get a really good looking end result, just because you're never going to see them this big or this out of context. Look at that. It's a boulder in a field. And if I go, I bet you if I go through the rest of the map and I put in some little tufts of grass like that, we're absolutely going to sell this kind of blowing in the wind field vibe. That's probably all it will take. And I can even actually make myself some pattern brushes and stuff. And Jared says watching on my phone is close to the correct size. You're probably right, actually. That's probably about right. Full screen. Illustration always makes time fly. I don't know how that happens. Probably like concept of flow or something. But it's time consuming. Jared says it makes me want to do more art, but it never seems like I have enough time. Doing art is a really time consuming process. And from my perspective, with something like this where I know I need to make, eventually dozens of tiles, I'm all about trying to figure out how to optimize, how to streamline that process so I can paint in layers and not paint every individual detail, right? Using the software and the tools to multiply how quickly things can get done, rather than working like I would if it were an oil painting where I have to do every single brush stroke myself. So that's going to be it for me for this week. Thank you all for tuning in. I think probably I will be back next week. It seems like things aren't going to be too crazy, which is good. And, I'm not sure what we'll do next. I probably can continue filling streams with illustrations of map tiles if you guys are interested in that. But I don't know. If you want to see something else, or you've got some ideas for other stuff you might want to see on stream, by all means let me know in the comments below. And for those of you who are new to the stream, which I think we actually have a couple of lurkers, like and subscribe if you liked what you saw. And I will see you guys in a week's time. Take care, friends. We will see you then.